All right, and we're live. Hello and welcome, everyone. This is the Osmompreneur Online Festival, and today we are chatting with some of the authors from our brand new book, The Women Changing the World. And I have a copy of the book here. If you haven't got your copy yet, you're able to order these online at osmompreneur.com. All right, we will get started. We have a number of our authors here today who I'll be having a chat with. We have Karthi. Hi, Karthi. How are you?
Hello. Hi. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Wonderful to have you here. We also have Ainsley here.
Hi.
Hi, how are you? Oops, you're on mute.
I'm good. Yourself?
Yeah, really good. Lovely to have you here, Ainsley.
Thanks for having me.
Kathy DeMarcos.
Hello, everyone. It's such a pleasure to be here with you all. Thanks, Peace and Katie.
Thanks, Kathy. Wonderful to have you here. Vanessa Fiducia. Hello.
Hi, Peace. How are you going?
I'm really good. It's lovely to see you.
You too.
Okay, so we might get started. I'll get each of you to introduce yourself for those of us who haven't met you before. So Karthi, we might start with you. Tell us a bit about who you are and what it is that you do. Karthi, I've got your, you're on mute. I think her internet might be playing up a little bit. We might go to you, Vanessa. Vanessa, for people who haven't met you before.
My name is Vanessa Fiducia. I'm the CEO and Director of Profit First Accounting. We specialise in a method of accounting that is based on cash flow, and it's an overlay of standardised accounting. We have a team of 8 based here in Melbourne. And we're super excited by what we do, and I'm so honoured to be a part of this next book that we've brought out together. And yeah, I'm really excited to be here today.
Thanks, Vanessa. I'm excited to hear more about your story. Thank you. Okay, over to you, Ainsley. For people who haven't met you before, tell us a bit about what you do.
Hi, everyone. So yeah, I'm Ainsley Hooper. I own Ainsley Hooper Consulting. I am a disabled anthropologist specialising in disability inclusion. I help businesses identify invisible barriers and remove them to reduce the risk of ableism or disability discrimination so they can provide more inclusive experiences.
Thanks, Ainsley. Okay, wonderful. Kathy DeMarcos, for people who haven't met you before, tell us a bit about who you are and what you do.
Hello, everyone. So I'm Kathy DeMarcos, and I'm actually the CEO and founder of Solutions to You. Solutions to You was actually birthed with the purpose for impact. So for me, it is actually about showing people in business and in corporate that when you actually do something with a purpose that's greater than yourself. So this book, Women Changing the World, really fits into everything that I actually believe in. We actually do things differently. So I'm actually a business advisor, and I'm also an executive coach. It's actually about high performance and scaling your business. It's really about identifying how you can create impact in what you do, not just for you, but for those around you.
Thank you, Kathy. Karthi, we might come back to you. Can you hear me? Can you click unmute? I think we lost her then. Oh, her internet must be playing up today. Well, we might go to you, Carrie. Hi, Carrie. How are you? We can't hear you yet. Unmute.
Yes, really well, thank you.
It's lovely to see you here. So, Carrie, for people who haven't met you before, would you please introduce yourself and tell us a bit about what you do?
Sure. So I'm Carrie. I've got Six Crows Fine Art Photography. I specialise in obviously fine art. I like to get a painterly kind of feel with my work. I mainly photograph women and children. That's my little niche. I'm in a small central Queensland town called Calliope. We have a population of about 3,000 people. So when I wanted to expand my business, I chose to train other women. I've just opened a studio in Brisbane earlier this year with my photographer Christine down there, and I'm looking to expand north next year, and go from there. So that's how I've chosen to go about living my small little country life, but still going big.
That's awesome. And Calliope, where's that? Is it near Mackay at all?
No, so it's actually pretty much smack bang in the middle. The closest big town is Gladstone, and even that's not that big.
Wonderful. So great to have someone from regional Queensland here.
Thank you.
Thanks, Carrie. Karthi, how are you going?
Hi, sorry, there was some technical issue. I couldn't hear anybody. So I was just working out, and now I think everything is fine.
Yeah, much better now. Karthi, for
Yes.
people who haven't met you before, could you please introduce yourself and tell us what you do?
Yeah, sure. Hi, I'm Karthi. My full name is Karthika. I'm living in Sydney. Basically, I'm from India. I was born and brought up in India, and then I started to travel around the world. And now we are settled in Australia. It's a great pleasure to meet Katie and Peace, who brought me into Osmompreneur. And they helped me to realize who really I am. And that's how, when this book came into in the formative years, months, I was thinking, wow, woman changing the world, and who am I, and how we can help as a family, as a woman, as a family, as a society, to bring about a change in this world. That inspired me. And what I do is I promote eco-friendly products made by mentally challenged women in shelters in India, and as well as made by women from lower sections of socioeconomic sections of India. Especially from a fishing village, where the women, they are not educated, and they don't come out as a woman. Their duty is to take care of their family. They are not financially independent, but their dream is to educate their kids, those fishing village women. And to send their kids to study, they have to spend money for them to go. They have to catch bus and go and study. They are in a remote place, and hence many kids don't go to school to study. So their dream is to educate their kids so that they can come up in life, the next generation. That's why they are stepping out from their home and learning stitching, and they are stitching wonderful cloth bags. So I am promoting that, so I can be a part of them coming out from their shell in improvising their own financial situation. So yeah, that's about me.
Yeah, that's so incredibly rewarding, the work that you're doing. You're empowering these women, providing employment opportunities for them, and financial independence for them.
Yes.
But then the flow-on effect of that goes to the next generation.
Yes,
so that their
absolutely.
children then have access to education. And so the impact of that is truly generational change, so that those children will be educated, and then that creates a brighter future for future generations. It's pretty exciting.
Yes.
To see that and be part of that.
Yeah, sure.
And what inspired you to work with this particular group of women? Had you met them? Did you know them? How did you have a connection somehow?
Yes, I would say each and every moment in life inspires you in a way. We don't know. All we need to do is observing. That's what I feel. Because it was ordinary dinner table conversation while I was having with my son, with my family. That day was I think it's one very good moment in my life, because that day we met an autistic young adult in a shopping mall, and he was having a meltdown. And my son, who was about 9 years at that age, he was trying to understand what was happening with that young adult. And we had a long conversation after coming back home, and he was asking so many questions, and then at the end he just said, I think we don't need to train them to be accepted in this so-called normal world. It is we who have to be trained to include them. It is we who have to understand them more, and we have to provide opportunities to mingle with them more so that they can be themselves, and it is we who have to provide that environment. So he was saying there should be more inclusivity, because he is not able to see such kind of people in his class at younger age, because they find it very hard. So they are in a special education schools and all those things. So that triggered us to think, how can we help? So after that, generally I am a person who thinks about conscious living. Whatever I do, I take immense pleasure and detail in what I am buying, what I am gifting to others. It is for my own pleasure, not for the society or not for anybody. So at that moment, I generally go and volunteer in various places. Especially I'm quite fond of education in different alternative education field system. I'm so passionate about them. So in one such occasion, when I was volunteering places, I found these people, the innocence, they are so pure and they are working hard, and it inspired me. Actually, they inspired me. The way they were stitching the bags, I just volunteered, and it inspired me. Their work is going waste, and I want to inspire. I got inspired from them, and I want to improvise it, monetize it, so that they can get empowered. That's what I felt. It's so awesome, the things they are. It is for the occupational therapy that they are stitching, but in turn, when they see the money, they are so happy. I'm not sure whether they know the real value of the money, because most of the women are schizophrenic patients who are taking treatment as well as working here. And in India, there is a taboo when it comes to mental health. It's always not talked outspoken. It's not being spoken out loud. It's a taboo, and especially if it is a woman, and the two lower economically lower sections, they just leave them on the road. So these helping groups, they help them to come into these shelters and provide safety place, and help them with their treatments. And as well as the next part is, once they come out of the treatment, what helps them to motivate to live is empowering them, embracing and empowering. That's what, when I felt the word embrace, I couldn't replace it with anything. So just like that, I started this embrace. Initially I bought for myself, and then I started gifting to my friends and family. And then I thought the next step is get into business. But to be honestly speaking, I'm not a business person, or nobody in my family or friends or of business background, but they inspired and my family inspired, and both my partner and my son said, why don't we do it? So yeah, that's how that's my story. So I'm getting inspired from these women, these ladies, so I want to take it further.
I love that. I love that you're partnering them with them in this journey and supporting them to create income and be employed, and you're helping them sell the products, which is incredible.
Yes.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
I started it as a hobby business, like during
Mhm.
weekends and markets, and because of the COVID, it did affect us, especially in India. It's really bad, but
Mm.
we try to help in our own way. So initially, because it's a social enterprise, I keep it balanced. Like I do part-time jobs and I do this. And 2022, we are stepping further. We are rebranding and we are trying to promote both in India, here in Australia, and our next step is in Europe. So we are working out on this. Let's see how it goes. But I'm enjoying this entire journey.
That's fantastic. Thank you,
And
Karthi.
thanks to Osmompreneur for the wonderful guidance and the motivation. Yeah.
Yeah, we love what you're doing. It's really beautiful, and we're happy to support you.
Thank
Thank you.
you, Katie.
Vanessa, I'd love to go to you now. So, Vanessa, I'd love to hear about Profit First and the work that you do and how that's really making a difference for people.
So, as I wrote in my chapter a little bit, I first started Profit First because of a instance that happened to me when I first came out of high school and I was working, and my journey to becoming a mother and wanting to give equal opportunities to my team. And, you know, not only hiring someone because they were just great at their job, or because I believe, you know, skill is something that can be taught, but, you know, you need to have the right values and the right attitude in a workplace as well. So not discriminating because someone's a parent or, you know, that's what I got told, that I couldn't work the same as what I did before I was a mum because, you know, our brains don't function correctly. Can you believe it? So, you know, hiring parents has always been a massive thing to me, like giving them an opportunity and supporting families and working alongside them. So we implemented a 4-day work week, which was something that was huge to me because it gave work-life balance to everyone in our team, even if they didn't have kids. So it's given some people a chance to further their studies if that's what they wanted to do, or parents a chance to go to Friday assemblies, or, you know, attend things with their children, or just have a me day. You know, sometimes it's nice when the kids are at school just to have a Friday off. So we have a 3-day weekend every week, which is great. And productivity hasn't dropped at all. You know, I've heard a lot of business owners come to me and say, how do you do it? Like, how do you fit everything in? And, you know, you give a piece of string and you make it work. So our team has been phenomenal. Even in the 4 days that they have, they still get everything done. And, you know, another thing that we were faced with, well, do you pay them less because they're only working 4 days? And it's like, well, no, because they're still doing the same amount of work they've always done. They're just doing it in less time. So why would you then punish them with less money? So that's something that we've done as a cultural thing within our team, which has impacted them and me, because I feel like it's a greater reward for everyone. But for our clients, the biggest thing that we do for them is their cash flow management. So a lot of businesses do the old method of accounting, which is sales minus expenses equals profit, which means a lot of business owners aren't paying themselves what they're worth, or they're paying themselves the drips and the drabs at the end. But we're in business to serve our families and serve a purpose, and we need money to be able to do that. So we want to be able to pay ourselves first. So flip the method on its head, and we do sales minus profit equals expenses. So we're teaching business owners to run their business after they've paid themselves a wage. So the methodology is really teaching business owners a totally different way of thinking. And while it's still in the same, you know, method, it's working with your own behavioral patterns. So it's just changing the way that we do the split of money. So instead of having money in one big bank account, which makes us feel like we've got abundance of money and we pay things willy-nilly, we're splitting it into different purposeful bank accounts, and then saying, okay, so we've got money set aside for tax, and that's already spent because it's not our money. We have money set aside for profit because we want to make profit on each sale that we make. Then we have money set aside for owner's pay because that's our reward as the owner. And then whatever's left is the operating expenses, and we need to learn to run our business off what's left in that little pie. So instead of having one big serving tray and we use all of those funds on that serving tray, we're splitting them off into little plates. So we've found a lot of business owners are smashing their debt, running their business off actual cash instead of overdraft accounts, and changing the whole way of thinking, which means they can make educated decisions on growing their business because they know where their cash flow is. And that's been a really big step for our businesses.
It's incredible. I love that you are doing things differently, everything from the way that people are managing their finances and structuring the way their business operations work, but especially what you're doing with the 4-day work week. I think that's really incredible. And for the people on your team who work with you, must be so wonderful to have that environment where they get to have a 3-day weekend every single weekend, and they get that time back with their family. What's some of the things that they say to you about that?
They love it when it's a public holiday on a Monday because that makes it 4 days.
I bet they do.
Awesome. And that happens a couple of times a year, but no, they're just really appreciative of, the situation. And it is like a family, a lot of workplaces say we're like a family, but this year I gave them the option for Christmas. What do you want to do? Do we want to go out for dinner? Do we want to go bowling? What sort of team activity do we want to do? And they said, can we have Christmas dinner at your house? Because, we are like a family and that feels more family orientated. We can bring all of our kids, we can bring our partners. I'm like, sure, feast at my house. Like, great. So I've got everyone's family and kids coming over here Christmas Eve for a big Christmas feast. So it really is like a family environment. My door's always open, so they can come in, any issues that they're having, they come to me with their personal issues as well as anything that happens in the office. And that's one of the feedbacks I get quite often, that they feel like they can come and talk to me about anything. So I think that keeping the lines of communication open all the time is a way to build a really sustainable team that will work hard for you all the time because you give back as well. So it works both ways. You can't be a one-way road when you're building a team and it's a successful business.
Absolutely. Oh, it's wonderful. And I love seeing that you've created this incredibly successful business and you're still in your 20s. It's quite amazing.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic. And what are your plans for the future? What does 2022 look like for you?
2022, I had a strategic planning meeting yesterday. So we always do, a 12-month plan, a 3-year plan, a 5-year plan, and a 10-year plan. And I must say, even after 5 years in business, 6 years in business, the 10-year one freaks me out because I'm like, holy cow, how do you plan for 10 years? Especially after the last 2 years when it's been so up and down. You just don't know what's going to happen. It's like, what are we going to have in 10 years' time? So next year, we're really planning on growth. So we've got all of our systems in place now. We've got a really amazing team behind us. And we have never done any advertising. So all of our clients that we have now and the business that we've built is fully off word of mouth, which we're super proud of. So we're going to dip our fingers in a little bit of marketing, I think, and see how we go with that. And that's something that I'm super uncomfortable with. So stepping outside of my comfort zone, and I'm going to hire a practice manager to take over some of my role.
Yep.
That I can step out of the business a little bit and focus on actually working on the business rather than in the business.
That's fantastic. Yeah, it sounds exciting.
So that's our 2022 plan.
2022, it's going to be a big one. Awesome. Thank you, Vanessa. We might come back to you, Carrie. How are you?
Good. I remember to unmute it this time.
All good, all good. So tell us about how you are making a difference in the world.
I like to think that my difference revolves around family and around confidence, especially in women and children. I'm very proud that a common kind of comment that I get after having a session with me is that their child has become a lot more confident. I also get a lot of children coming in with autism and things like that. And I think it's the one-on-one environment. My studio is very small, it's very cozy, and I think there's that kind of comfortability with me. So I think it's important that we, especially as mothers, are kind of tasked with helping our children develop that confidence and that self-worth and that self-esteem, and that can be incredibly daunting. So I like to think that I contribute to that in a very small way. The pieces that I create are heirloom pieces of art, so they are hanging on the wall for generations. There's something that the children can then pass on to their children. The canvas is beautiful heirloom canvas, and it's stunning to see. I like to think that it looks like something that used to be hanging in a castle a very long time ago, especially with that kind of painterly air to it.
Yeah, beautiful, beautiful. I have seen some of your artworks on Instagram, and they're just stunning and so unique. Yeah, really beautiful, really beautiful. And Carrie, I read a bit of your chapter last night. So your journey to getting to where you are today hasn't always been easy. Would you like to share a bit of your story?
Yeah, I was a little bit of a no-hoper, really. If you hadn't met me even 5 years ago, I was a very different person to what I am today. I had a very long journey with alcoholism. It wasn't until I actually decided to become a mother that I quit drinking, and that was a very hard decision, because I felt personally like my confidence and my creativity came from out of a bottle rather than something that was within me. So it was scary to decide to quit drinking, because I thought I was actually going to lose a part of me that I thought other people liked and that I thought I liked the most as well. And I was worried I wouldn't be able to create anymore. But I obviously learned since then that it was actually holding me back from my true potential.
Mm. So that must have been quite an incredible journey, because that whole mindset shift that, you know, what if I give up drinking and I'm not creative anymore? That must have been kind of scary.
Yeah, I was petrified. I was genuinely petrified. At the end of the day, I actually quit photography for that reason, because I thought I won't be able to edit anymore, because I used to edit with, you know, several bottles of wine and a packet of cigarettes. I thought I won't be able to do anything anymore. So I quit my business. I shut it down. And then it wasn't until my daughter was born and I decided to do something for me, and it happened to be picking up the camera again and just taking a chance. And this has all completely bloomed from taking that chance, doing something for me. I felt like my life wasn't really mine anymore. I lived on a property by myself. My husband at the time was working away way more than he was home. And even when he was home, he wasn't home enough that my baby actually wanted to go to him. So it was very much all on me. And I found something for me through photography.
And what would you say to other women who were in that dark place where you were, who are going through that right now? What advice would you have for them?
You're definitely not alone. I would suggest talking to your doctor, especially if you're having a battle with alcohol. Please do talk to your doctor about it first, because it can be quite dangerous to just stop, depending on what kind of stage you're at. So definitely talk to your doctor. Getting a psychologist that you trust. I went through dozens. If you don't get someone that you connect with straight away, keep trying, because there will be someone out there that you click with. There will be someone who understands you and can support you through your journey. But you're definitely not alone. Whether you literally are alone on a property, you're still not alone. There are ways and means, and COVID has taught us that lesson better than anything in the world. Up until January this year, I did not even have a webcam. So that's been one big learning experience there. But yeah, just you're not alone. You're not by yourself. And you can do it, and you have no idea what's waiting for you on the other side.
Oh, that's beautiful. Thank you, Carrie.
Thank you.
And yeah, congratulations on getting through that incredibly difficult phase and now having such an amazing business.
Thank you.
Beautiful. Thanks, Carrie. Ainsley, let's come to you. Hi, Ainsley. So Ainsley, I'd love to hear more about the impact that you are making on the world and why it's so close to your heart.
Okay, so basically, I mean, I see my impact is that I'm providing the tools for businesses and organisations to be more inclusive, and empowering them by providing them ways to identify how to do so, and through that, it's about them helping them, and then they're helping empower other people as well. So, and I guess like for me, why it's so personal is, yes, I'm a disabled person, but it wasn't until I've been a lifelong wheelchair user. That's how I describe myself. It wasn't until I was in my 20s when I actually started to need disability services. So I'd not used them before. I needed to use them as a result of an injury that I sustained in hospital. And I found that engaging in these services, people were talking to me in a way I had never been spoken to before. They were talking to me like I was a complete idiot. And I was in my 20s. I was working full time. And I had all these people going, wow, you work, like just surprised. And to me, that was so confronting. So I just thought that, at that time, I didn't have a wide disability support network. So I just assumed at the time that, hey, I've got an attitude problem. If these people are talking to me, they're here to help me, blah, blah, blah. But was then talking to other people later on down the track, I found, okay, it's actually not just me, it's a systemic issue. And so therefore, by helping people to learn how to see things through other people's eyes, that's helping to promote inclusion. And it's basically like, as Karthi was saying earlier, about it's not fixing people, as in, so it's not fixing disabled people. It's about helping other people see how easy inclusion is, and how you can just talk to people without any barriers. Yeah,
because inclusion doesn't have to be hard, does it?
No, and it's a very interesting thing. So I've been in business now for 3 years, and I always remember, like at the very start, talking about these things. Everyone, all the businesses, some of the businesses that I was talking to, they'd be going, "Oh, but that's too expensive to do that." Well, actually, that if it's too expensive, think about it this way: there's 20% of Australians who have a disability. If you're not making things inclusive, then you're missing out on that target market. And we're not, and there are a lot of us that work. So there's an income there that you're not actually tapping into.
Yeah, absolutely. And companies that aren't inclusive, then, they're missing out on that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, especially with COVID's shown us, to me, that's been the most fascinating. It's been a scary experience, but also fascinating as well, that to see just how inclusive we can be when we want to be, when it's for the greater good.
Yeah. And do you mean in terms of Zoom meetings and access to things in that way?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, for example, like just from a personal perspective, Zoom meetings. I hadn't used Zoom very much before COVID. I think I'd use it maybe once or twice. As soon as COVID hit, everything's on Zoom, which is fantastic. Being able to order things, although there are some issues with the ordering things still, but even like with workplaces, with the remote working, I remember going back to that time I was talking about being in hospital. And I was in hospital for about a year. And even though my body was, you know, broken at the time, my mind wasn't. So I could have still actually done my job if I'd been given access to the things that I needed to. And at the time they were like, no, sorry, we can't do that. It's too expensive, too many security issues, blah, blah, blah. However, COVID hits. All of my ex-colleagues were working from home and doing exactly what they said to me was not possible. So that's been fascinating, but frustrating, but fascinating to see. Then hopefully that we learn from that going forward, that we can do these things.
That's so interesting. I hadn't even thought of that from that perspective. The fact that remote working, it benefits so many people, because I mean, an obvious one is people who live in really remote and regional, rural places. But yeah, that access for all kinds of people to be able to be included.
Yeah, like people with caring responsibilities, you know, all that kind of thing. Like and I know like there's been a bunch of networking groups who prior to the pandemic, when it was suggested, hey, certain people can't access your networking groups because you don't provide accessible options, being told the same thing, yeah, no, sorry, we can't do that, too expensive. But now they've got online chapters. So yeah. And I am hopeful that these changes that we've seen brought in, you know, everything from hybrid events to remote working to all of those kind of things, I'm hopeful that that will continue, and that will be one thing out of this pandemic which is a benefit and a lasting change to provide more inclusion and access to everyone. Exactly, yeah. And it's and just to see like some of the things that have been coming out of it has just been absolutely fascinating. Like, for example, like seeing galleries produce products which can go out to nursing homes, so that and even for people like for myself, I've been working, I work from home anyway. However, I've been pretty much isolating for like the last 2 years just to ensure that, I don't get sick, because if I do, then it's not going to be good, but that's for another story. But yeah, so basically seeing all these different things and how businesses are adapting and the things that they're providing to people. And now people without disabilities are seeing that they're just, I'm hoping that they're understanding that it's accessible for everybody, and that to me it's a beautiful thing to see.
Yeah, I'm hopeful that it will continue, that inclusion and access for everyone will be something that people think about more and find ways to be more inclusive. And it's interesting, I'm just looking at the cover of the book, and the first design of this cover, we didn't have a wheelchair in it. And you reached out to me and you said, well, this is really beautiful and inclusive, but there's something we could do, a simple change we could make to make it more inclusive. And I wrote to the artist and she said, sure, no problem, and was able to add that in there. And it's small things like that that actually make a big difference.
It was, and on a personal level, that was huge. I remember when I first I looked at it and I was thinking, okay, so because I guess, so for to sort of explain it to people and frame it is that, so I'm in my 40s now, right? But I mean, not just talking about the work situation, but for so many other things, it's always been, no, sorry, that's too hard. Or look, we can't, we've already done this. We can't change it. We'll think about that in the future. So there's all these things, always like, okay, so you then learn to, you learn to shut up and just accept things as they are. And so for you guys to do that was actually really huge, because for me it was more, it was a very personal thing, and it just showed just how easy it is to do it, and it didn't change anything for you at all, which was it was great.
Yeah, and I think sometimes it's difficult to speak out about things and make a request like that. Like I can imagine you might have felt awkward even sending that email to me to ask that question.
Yes. So when I got that response, that was huge. But I mean, it's on the same. It's not just people with disabilities as well. I mean, it's the same for non-disabled people. I know non-disabled people are always scared of getting things wrong, and sometimes in that process of being afraid of getting things wrong, that no action is taken, and so that because people are scared to ask the wrong things or say, "Oh, excuse me, but what do you need?" Blah blah blah. And so the way that I frame it to people is, people with disabilities, we want to be able to have an experience. This is, I guess, the philosophy of my business. We want to be able to have an experience that means that we do not have to ask for assistance. We want to be able to just go somewhere and do exactly what everybody else is doing and having that exact same experience. So thinking about it that way and thinking about what can you do to provide that experience to everybody, that's the best way to go. And I wanted to mention there's a fantastic resource just recently that was brought out by Media Diversity Australia. It's a handbook, and it's designed by disabled people, specifically for journalists, in helping journalists figure out how to talk to disabled people. But the resource, and I'll pop a link in the chat so you can pop it up later. The resource is actually really handy for everybody because it just covers things. Well, it's thunder in the background. It covers things that we're all really wanting to know. Like, for example, okay, I'm a wheelchair user, but it doesn't mean I know everything about disability. It doesn't know, like, for example, I don't have an experience of autism, for example, or being blind or being deaf. I don't have any of that kind of stuff. So for me, learning how to talk to other people as well is a very handy resource. Like one example is when I speak to journalists, and this is something I've just learned in the last few years, is not having to divulge my disability when it's not necessarily. For example, journalists will go, usually the first question they'll ask, so what is your disability? Doesn't matter whether or not the conversation is about disability or not, it's the first thing they'll ask. So, and I grew up, that was a normal thing. So you would just go, oh, okay, so this is what my situation is, and then you go through all the whole rigmarole and revealing things that you didn't want to talk about. So having these things where people this resource where people can learn, okay, so it's appropriate to talk about this in this situation, but it's not appropriate to talk about in this situation, just makes it so much easier for disabled people. So yeah, I'll pop that one in the chat.
That sounds like such a great resource. And I
think it is.
What you touched on before, that people are afraid to get it wrong.
Yeah.
I think that's a huge one, and people don't want to offend or do the wrong thing. And so then sometimes that'll stop them from doing anything, because you could get it wrong and you'll offend somebody, and then what'll happen? Whereas actually we should always do our best.
Yes. Yeah. And that involves admitting that we don't know. And it's okay that we don't know. And this is the thing, when I talk about invisible barriers are those things that we can't see because of our privilege, because we don't have to actually see those things in our daily lives. There was one thing the other day that I was asked about, and it's gone from my mind what it was, but it was basically around that, saying, oh, look, we weren't sure how to do this, so instead we've done this. And it's like, well, actually, if you had asked in the first place, and it's okay to ask, and this is the thing, so I really want to help people get past the fear of asking in case they're going to offend, because it's just that's a big barrier. But those invisible things, once we see those, it helps us see so many other things as well. And for me also, it's fascinating. So like when I'm doing the work that I do, I talk to clients of businesses, and they'll say, okay, I can't do this because of this, or it needs this. And then I'm like, wow, I hadn't even thought about that. It's fascinating.
Yeah. So even yourself as a disabled person, there's things that you haven't thought about because there's so many layers to it. It's so big. So how should any of us expect to be perfect at it?
Exactly right. Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. So fascinating. And even the term ableism is a recent term for me. As a non-disabled person, I hadn't come across that before.
Yeah.
I'm just starting to understand what that means and what that looks like. And I'm following quite a few disabled people who speak about these kind of things on social media, and I'm learning so much.
Yeah, I mean, ableism is to me, it's a phrase that I've only learnt about really in the last, I'd say, 2 years. And what is actually really fascinating and quite scary is that because of when I've read about ableism, I realized that, wow, for the first half of my life or whatever, I was ableist towards myself. So I grew up because of things not being accessible. And back then, like as I mentioned, I think I mentioned in my book, is that accessibility and inclusion, they weren't things that were talked about when I was growing up. So it was just basically you grew up expecting, you grew up used to things being as they were. So if you couldn't participate in something, you just couldn't participate in it. And so I learned kind of just to, I guess, blend into society. And as a result, I hated, it's funny, I call myself a disabled person now, and it's only this year because of COVID that I'm actually quite comfortable, comfortable with the label. If you'd called me that a few years ago, I would have balked at it. Like, I just didn't want to have that label, and it was because of that internal ableism that I had about my own disability, and thinking that I was the problem, because that's the medical model of disability, thinking that the body's the problem, the disabled people are the people that need to be fixed, and rather than what we now know is the social model, whereas the world needs to be accessible and inclusive.
So fascinating. And
it really is.
Yeah. And wow. So how did you come to terms with, changing your mindset around that?
So the first thing was when I started, so I guess it's been a gradual journey. So when I mentioned about the disability services, figuring out why these people were talking to me in this particular way, because I was just me, I then realized they're talking to me that way because I'm a disabled person. So they've got in their head what the potential of a disabled person is, like, for example, mentality, whatever. And as I said, they were surprised that I worked and that I studied. And even to show that surprise, I would have 2 support workers in the house. And I remember one went to the other, goes, "Oh, she works, wow, and she studies too," and just the way, the patronizing way it was being said. But so I guess there's coming into being a disabled person, I learned I first started to go from just being Ainsley, and then being Ainsley, a person with a disability, and that part came about because of being around a network of other people with disabilities. When the NDIS came out, at the very beginning, I was part of a group called Lead Bowen, and were disabled people talking about our experiences and how the NDIS was helping. At that time, I realised how actually lucky I was to have been so ignorant of the whole system, because I didn't have disability services prior to that. And then listening to all these other people and all the things that they'd put up with, I was just like, wow, okay. So then that's when I was like, okay, I'm a person with a disability. And then when COVID hit, and I'm doing a thesis around this stuff at the moment, so it's very interesting. At the very start of COVID, my disability services, as everybody in the disability community knows, the disability services were put into question because they didn't know what to do if anybody from the services got sick. So they didn't know what to do, and they didn't know if they'd be able to continue to provide our services. The reason this is that the government had not included disabled people in the disaster plans, which was an issue that had been identified about 7 years earlier. The government had been told, you guys need to fix this, and 2021 rocks up, 2020 rocks up, and we weren't there. So it's been a scary time. Through that, but as I said, I was talking about earlier about all the good things that happened at the start of COVID, which is, so there have been great things, but as it's gone on, there are things that have been happening in the background that people aren't aware of because it's not in the media. And then from that, I started to realize it's basically, I am one of these people. I am one of these disabled people. And because of the way the government has been ignorant, I'm trying to think, because of the way that the government has been about disability, disregarding us in such a blatant way, it's become very political to me. And so therefore I'm very proud to wear the disabled badge, because I just wanted to quickly mention one thing is that for example, in the UK, 60% of COVID deaths in the UK are disabled people. And in Australia, so the UK is the only country that's keeping these stats. And I'm sorry to make this a depressing talk, but it's important. It's important for us to know. But so 60% in the UK disabled people deaths. And in Australia, well, in every other country, they're not keeping stats of disabled deaths. So, but what's great is that we have a network in the disability community. It's through mutual aid. So on Twitter, you'll find a huge disability network. There's a hashtag that you'll have seen in the media called underlying health issues. They don't mention that anymore. So they'd lump, because they don't keep track of disabled people's deaths, they lump us in with underlying health issues. And there's a whole other part of it I'm not going to go into because it's so layered. But out of that, there's about 700 people in Australia with disabilities who have died as well. So for me now, it's much more important and vital that I wear that.
And this is why your advocacy work is so important, because we need to know these stats and we need to be looking after disabled people properly, and we need to be making sure that everyone is included.
Exactly. And that's it. I mean, inclusion is so important, especially when the government is actively being exclusive.
I could keep talking to you all day, Ainsley, but I'd love to ask one more question. For people,
sure.
what would you like to say to people who are non-disabled? What would they need to know? What do you wish they knew that would help them be more inclusive?
To be more inclusive, I'm actually giving a talk on Friday. It's December 3rd. It's International Day of People with Disabilities. So I'm giving a keynote speech on that day, and that's actually one of the questions that I've been asked for the day. So basically, this is what how I'd like people to think about it. So I guess when we're talking about COVID and lockdowns and all that kind of stuff, think about the things that you weren't able to do because of lockdown. Those are the and think about what you and also think about things that you have been able to do as a result of the pandemic that you weren't able to do previously. Those are the kind of things that you need to be aware of, because they're the things that make things more inclusive. So people have been talking about not being able to do things. So be mindful of that, and think about, okay, what haven't I been able to do, and what would have been, I'm trying to think of the words, but what would have made my life better or easier to get that done? Like, for example, working. I know a lot of people had to pivot the way that they worked to get things done because of because our routines were just completely thrown out of the water. So think about that, and think about how you can use that to help other people in the future. So it's about, like, for example, I know, like, as I said, like with my previous my ex-colleagues, they had to like do a whole pivot to ensure that the company could continue on doing what they're doing and providing their staff with what they needed to get that done. That's the kind of thing that needs to continue on. And also, as I mentioned earlier, you're not expected to know everything. If you've not had any experience with disability, like, it's completely fine not to know anything, but it just always ask.
Yeah. Thank you so much. It's just been so wonderful chatting with you, and I'm really looking forward to reading your chapter in the book too.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ainsley. Karthi DeMarcos, over to you. I'd love to hear how you are changing the world through the work you do.
Thank you. Firstly, I actually want to recognise and acknowledge, each of the co-authors that have spoken today. There's so much that they've shared that's actually given us, valuable insight as to how we might be able to do things a little bit differently, and even by sharing our stories. So, Carrie, your story is so powerful and actually reaches a whole lot of people that have actually sat behind the shadows and not wanted to actually come forward. And it gives people hope and insight, as to what you can actually do. And Karthi, your story, particularly with your son, it's actually about recognizing and pausing in certain moments, just to actually see what else I can do and to see what impact you want to make. And with Vanessa, the changes that she's made in her business, I'm really proud, of her journey, and especially being so young to actually have the foresight and the courage to actually do things differently. I certainly understand what she has actually done, coming from a business point of view. It makes a huge difference to the way that people actually contribute. It's almost like she's running the business like a family, which I can relate to. So your story, about having your staff at home for Christmas, they tell me when they're coming over. They just say, this is the date, and can you make sure you cook this? So I can relate wholeheartedly. And Ainsley, what you have actually shared, it's interesting. I actually had a HR manager ring me to say, Karthi, I know this is actually out of the blue, but I have a young man who you know, who through a tragedy, a car accident, is now in a wheelchair. And I know you don't have any work, but if something comes up, will you actually think about hiring them? Well, you know, it so happened within a month, I could actually rearrange the business and bring him in. Now, he had no skills. So to Vanessa's point, skills can be taught. But it was actually asking the questions of what will he need? I didn't have a disability toilet in the building, to be quite honest, you know. And so it was me actually ringing around other strata companies in buildings around the area to say, do you have a disability toilet? And then going back and saying, would this actually be suitable, you know, for us to make these arrangements? So I guess I've taken away what everybody has shared and just want to acknowledge each of you for sharing your stories, because they are powerful. It actually enables us to really think, you know, about what we choose to do and how we do that. So thank you. Before I actually say anything else, I really just wanted to give, you know, respect back to my co-authors. So yeah, for me, when I actually started business and I branched out on my own, there were two decisions that I made. One is that as I stepped forward, my business was really going to be about impact. You know, it was purpose for impact. And there were two ways that I was going to do that. One was, in fact, around my commitment. So I do everything in a minimum of 18 months. And the next step is 5 years. And then it's actually exit. So exit could be 20 years. It could actually be 5 years. It depends on who I'm working with. So the purpose for impact for me, the first step was, and I don't share this with a lot of people, but I had committed to the first 18 months of my business operation to show people the importance of paying things forward. So for me, that actually meant that 60%, so I'm very definitive in the way that I operate, 60% as a minimum of my work would be contributing to pro bono work. So anything that I actually engaged in, it was actually about paying things forward, which meant that, yes, I was fortunate to be able to do that in business to start off with, but I was very mindful about who I was actually going to do that pro bono work with. Anybody that actually had a social enterprise outlook, so within their business was actually either working in non-for-profit, was actually doing a social enterprise project, was a startup that incorporated a social enterprise impactful project. I would dedicate my time as a business advisor, as a coach and a mentor to actually get them going. I'm happy to say that I actually succeeded in that. So I'm coming out at the back end of that now. And I exceeded 60%. So I've done that. And it's been nice to actually see the impact that it has had to businesses that would not have actually been able to afford, you know, I guess, to pay for services like mine. So that was actually stage one. The second stage was, I'm very much about bigger impact, global impact. So you can see behind me is actually what I call my love work. My love work is actually about genuinely looking at how we can make impact on a global basis, generationally and sustainably. So I have developed programs that are specifically geared with the knowledge that I have with my good old age. So I've been in business for a really long time. You know, it's taking my 3.5 decades of knowledge in finance, in setting up businesses, scaling businesses, my qualifications as a counselor, and incorporating all of that into showing our younger generation, our future generation, how they actually can have skills, tools, and knowledge that, you know, we would have loved to have had as children, and instilling that in the programs that I run. So the programs actually start at pinnacle ages in their lives. And it started off with the work that I did in Tanzania. So we run programs over there, and it's all been fully funded by me. I'm so blessed that I've actually had people that have trusted me in the process. I mean, one of my facilitators on the ground I have mentored for the last 7 years, you know, through a story that I shared earlier of, you know, when I first went to Tanzania, you know, she reached out and asked if I would help her with a business plan. And so over the years, I have mentored her and coached her, and we've done budgets, and we've actually done, programs to actually get grants and all sorts of things. She's one of my facilitators on the ground now, where we run these programs. But these programs aren't just about them; it actually impacts their families too. So at the ages of 12 to 14 is our initial program, and then it starts with children that are at 15 to 17 years of age. Again, those years, at school where the hormones actually kick in, and they're really trying to discover who they are. And then we build in 2 other programs, which is at school age leavers, those that want to enter the corporate world, so really leadership skills. And then it's the entrepreneurial skills. And I put them in an incubator program, but again, it is that social impact outlook that needs to be incorporated. So it's really about paying things forward continuously and then showing them how they can actually do exactly the same thing. One of the things that I have had a lot of people actually say to me is, Kathy, why do you do work over there? Why? Like, we can do it over here too. So that has now actually expanded to programs for Western society, for those that can afford it, who are really actually wanting to impact the lives of their children. Because let's face it, when we give them advice, they go, and everything else that comes out. So actually putting them in an environment that's actually about global impact enables them to really absorb the information and make changes. And we've actually seen that happening. So we're actually launching programs here in Australia and internationally, with the impact of it being that every child that actually pays for another one in a developing country or in a developing community. So we can actually roll things out on a bigger scale. And of course, I can't do it all by myself. I have an incredible team that actually sits behind me, and interestingly enough, they're actually all females. So it's actually about bringing people on the journey with me and showing corporates and businesses that we can do business. I mean, I'm a numbers person, so it doesn't mean that everything has to just be about bottom line. When you actually create it with a purpose, you know exactly where you're actually steering, in life. So I know I wake up every single day and I can tell you I'm smiling every single day. It doesn't matter what chaos surrounds me. I know that what I'm going to do today is actually going to impact somebody else, whether it's an adult that I'm working with in business and I help them reshape not just what they do in business, but the way that they think about the world, or whether it's actually a program that's about to, relaunch. So we've had another program actually finish up, I think it was last week, out of Tanzania. And I can't tell you, these kids, the facilitators are saying they don't want to leave, they actually are asking, what's next? When's the next program? What are we going to do? And their parents are actually contacting the facilitators to say, is there another program? Can they do something else? So the joy that's actually coming out of, these programs that are teaching them core skills, courage, confidence, values, boundaries, the things that we actually need to learn as adults. We're starting and providing that sort of insight to the kids so that they can start to build their actual road forward with a different lens. And let's just face it, the reality is that our children are not going to be in a workforce that looks anything like what we have experienced. So actually enabling them and giving them the skills to actually understand that failure is actually part of what we need to learn and develop, and then to get up and try again and to innovate and create is really something that, we all need to actually embrace in whatever capacity that means for us, whether it's the discussion, having those challenging discussions, which Ainsley actually shared, in part of her message. It's all part of the skills that we actually teach. So that's what I guess drives me, and every single day. I love what I do, and I love the impact that I actually make, for those around me, and more importantly for those that I guess are yet to come, because what we're all doing together isn't just about now, it's actually around generations. We won't be around. I know that the impact today for me isn't about me, it's really about our children's children, you know. So how we step out and forward into the world is really up to us, and here we are.
Thank you, Karthi. Yes, that powerful ripple effect that will be felt is huge.
Yeah.
And yeah, I love the work that you're doing in Tanzania. It's incredible.
Thank you. Watch this space. We will be in other places very soon.
I'm excited. Can't wait. All right. Well, thank you everyone for being part of our panel today. I've really enjoyed chatting with each of you. And thank you to everyone who's tuned in. Our next guest speaker is up shortly, but I'm just going to quickly switch over the tech and I will then introduce her